Hi class, today we're going to be talking about chapter 2 in your sports marketing book in regards to strategic marketing management. And we hope to understand by reading this chapter that consistent marketing-minded leadership, complete with a vision and a plan, is really truly necessary in today's competitive environment. In fact, an absence of that type of leadership can really lead to disaster. So this particular chapter lays out basic elements required for strategic marketing leadership, sometimes referred to as marketing management. And then we also emphasize the concept of a marketing planning process, and you'll hear a little bit more about that as we go on. But I want you to be aware of 4 items or objectives that you need to kind of be familiar with by the time you finish not only reading the chapter, outlining the chapter, but listening to this lecture. And that's really the purpose of the online lectures, ladies and gentlemen, is to make sure that you're having an opportunity to once over the information after you've already read it and taken notes on your own. But in regards to chapter 2, we're going to identify key stakeholders in sports marketing and look at the interactions between them that creates brand perception. We are also going to recognize the interacting components of the marketing management process. Another objective is to appreciate the core elements of market analysis, product concept, and product position, and then also to understand the distinctions among the 5 P's of sports marketing. Your textbook actually starts out by discussing sports strategy, and they highlight the sports of tennis, golf, and hockey, and how they had some pitfalls in their marketing plans and in their vision and in their performance. So I'm going to kind of skip over that. You do want to read that and be familiar with it in case you have some small questions that come from it in regards to your quiz. But this lecture is actually picking up on page 32 when it starts to really talk about the marketing planning process. I think the whole point of the publishers in highlighting hockey, golf, and tennis was to show you what can happen if you don't have a strategic marketing management plan. So sometimes we learn more from what not to do than sometimes our successes. But like I said, I am going to pick up our lecture this morning in regards to marketing planning process. If you look on page 33 of your textbook, it's actually figure 2.1, the marketing and management process in sport. This is a really, really close example of something that you'll be creating for your project in regards to the logic model. But basically what you're seeing on this page is the entire layout of the marketing management strategy. And it's also referred to as the marketing management process, the MMP, and it's really used to develop a marketing plan. We have to understand that the marketing plan has to be integrated into an organization's larger strategic plan, which includes every aspect. But the MMP is truly the backbone of marketing. So the marketing plan aligns tactical details and operations like establishing prices for things with broader organizational strategies such as setting attendance goals. And all of the elements of the plan must be synchronized and fully integrated. So if you're looking at page 33, you can see the strategic components listed on the right hand side, and then the tactical components get very, very specific in nature. So you'll notice that the strategic components really kind of guide what happens with the tactical components. Your textbook gives an example of, think of the strategic components as the quarterback, and then the quarterback has to be armed with all the different scenarios about how players might come at him or get through his defense, and then the tactical components are reactions to those different situations that take place. The rest of the chapter is really going to go into these strategic components in regards to looking at developing vision, position, and purpose, developing strategic goals and objectives, developing a marketing mix plan, integrating the marketing plan into the broader organizational strategy, and control and evaluate all elements of the marketing plan. This is a really great chapter that lays out a lot of the information that you need to be aware of for your class project. So if your classmates have told you that they've skipped this lecture, they're not going to listen to it online, you might want to encourage them because it really does kind of help explain some of the components required for your project. So I already talked about this slide. I kind of went ahead. But again, figure 2.1 is the marketing management process in sport. Is located on page 33 of your textbook. I am going to go on talking about developing a vision, position, and purpose. There are three really kind of core components in regards to the vision, position, and purpose, and that's looking at core vision and ideology, doing a SWOT analysis, and then something that your textbook, or I'm sorry, your PowerPoint doesn't really harp on a whole lot is being able to identify trends and fads. So those are kind of three key things that we're going to talk about right now in regards to step one. So let's talk about developing a core vision and having some sort of ideology. When we talk about developing a vision, we mean visualizing the organization. Any strategic plan has to operate within the framework of the organization's core vision and ideology. So it's very, very well explained for you in your book. If you're looking at page 34, it's talking about the fundamental distinguishing characteristic of the most enduring and successful corporations is that they preserve a cherished core ideology while simultaneously stimulating progress and change in everything that is not part of their core ideology. That's pretty visionary, pretty big, looking at a big picture there. So any organization, specifically within sports, they need to determine or establish some sort of core values and ideology before they even move forward with some sort of strategic marketing efforts. The core vision is really going to set up what you will continuously return to when you're working on goals and objectives for your company. So once you've established a core vision, core ideology, then you're moving on to something called a SWOT analysis. And SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Your book does a pretty good job of outlining it. But all strategy begins with an understanding of the environment and the organization or the place of the product within it. So once again, think about establishing some sort of company or getting ready to, maybe you've come up with a product that you want to sell. Performing a SWOT analysis really helps organizations systematically gather and collect data about their consumers. Your textbook talks about data-based marketing, and it also talks about customer relationship management. From here on forward, you're just going to see the initials DMB and CRM. You might want to put a little post-it on page 35. I know that I've had to come back to this page several times because I keep forgetting what DMB and CRM are, but you will hear it mentioned throughout the rest of the chapter, probably outside of this chapter as well, so you might want to mark it just in case. But the SWOT analysis really helps the organizations understand who their customers are, who they want their customers to be, and how they can gather and retain certain customers. And what organizations have to do is scan their internal and external environments before they're able to move forward with those strategic marketing efforts that you saw in figure 2.1 and page 33. So internal is dealing with strengths and weaknesses of the organization. And then the external environment deals with opportunities and threats against the product. And this is really important, essential, because it gives company leaders, the visionaries, a complete entire picture so that they're prepared to make the right decisions to be able to move on. And that's why the last bullet says it assists sports organizations in analyzing markets, trends, and fads. And that's very important because if you don't understand if something's going to be around in the future, or if it's something that's quick, that's kind of comes and goes, I guess fads, it can really affect your organization if you're not properly prepared for that. Another benefit of doing a SWOT analysis is providing the organization an opportunity to really adjust their strategy or maybe even steer it in a completely different direction based on the information that they've received. As long as the organization is very, very careful not to stray from its original core vision. So your book talks about two concepts: develop new alignments to preserve core and stimulate progress. And this SWOT analysis also gives you an opportunity to eliminate any misalignments. So the SWOT analysis really helps fine-tune your plan, your strategic goals, to be able to make sure that not only you're continuing with the core vision and ideology, but that your product is going to be viable to the general public. So, like all organizations, constantly assessing the realism of their theory of the business can be very, very advantageous towards moving forward. The next step then after performing your core vision and SWOT analysis and looking at trends is to really develop the strategic goals and objectives. So we need to be very careful not to confuse goals and objectives. Goals are typically very, very broad statements. In fact, your book refers to them as big, hairy, audacious goals, versus objectives that are usually very detailed, very quantified targets. So, for an example, in hockey, the Denver Grizzlies really wanted to, an example of a big, hairy goal for them was to create high awareness and visibility for the Grizzlies in the community. We want positive publicity for all programs in which we are involved. So that is a very big, broad term that we can establish objectives based on quantified targets. So for an example, if we're talking about trying to create high awareness and visibility for this hockey team, an objective that could be very specific in regards to numbers could be that we want to create a Facebook page and we want to get 12,000 likes in one day. That's something that's very quantifiable. And as you guys progress further along in the program, I'm hoping, this is a side note by the way, that you're starting to understand the difference between qualitative and quantitative information. Qualitative has to do with qualities, very descriptive, describing words, versus quantitative has to do with quantity or numbers. So that also might kind of help you in remembering goals versus objectives. Objectives typically are quantified targets. There's a number involved. But then having clarified goals and then objectives is typically what sets the manager apart from the caretaker. In other words, who's going to get the job done? Do you have this big umbrella idea, and then do you have certain objectives set up in place to help you meet that? Now we're moving on to step 3, and this is in regards to developing a ticket marketing sales and a service plan. So this is when it kind of gets exciting because you're progressing on with your plan. You have missions, you have objectives in place, and the marketer has to develop some sort of plan at both a very strategic and very specific tactical level as well. So we start by emphasizing ticket marketing sales. But then we have to move on to identifying target segments in order to be able to develop our products and prices. So this is, again, where it gets kind of fun because you really start getting out there and getting to know who your fans are going to be, who your stakeholders will be. And that's what they mean when they say they must segment the market and determine key targets. Who are they going to advertise? Number one, what's their product? But then who are they going to be able to reach out to? So you've got determining some key targets, and what we want to do in sports marketing is treat every consumer as an individual, hopefully creating even a program that's tailored to individual needs and capabilities. Marketing theorists have typically considered several bases for segmentation. Again, defining who your targets are. You guys have heard of demographic information, identifying key stakeholders by age or sex or income or education or profession. They also look at geo-market information. Where do they live? What's their location? What zip code are they addresses in? Psychographic information, in other words, lifestyle factors, what they like to do, what their interests, opinions, hobbies are. They also look at product usage rate. If they are season tickets for Orlando City, do they actually go to every match? Or do they are very infrequent even though that they've bought an entire year's worth of season tickets? And they also look at product benefits. What products are most important to the consumers and what do they think of those products in regards to benefits for them? Any segmentation strategy is going to rely on that DBM system, remember, database marketing system, to distinguish marketable clusters. And again, this is what you are going to want to pay attention to in regards to your class project and determining who your market segments are. These databases for marketing also create a potential for something closer to individual marketing strategies, sometimes called relationship marketing. So this would even be understanding who your segment of the population is, who are your ticket holders, who are your fans, and being able to establish a more personal relationship with them, not necessarily personal, but reaching out to say happy birthday, offering certain services within the stadium because you know that they have children. So maybe they set up some sort of babysitting facility. Wouldn't that be amazing? Or anything that is a little bit more personal to the segment of the population that they're trying to reach. And one of the reasons that you try and identify just who the stakeholders are for you is because of the concept of the escalator. And if you look at page 44, you see figure 2.2, and this is the escalator for sport attendance and participation. And it's kind of a graphic representation of consumer movement to higher levels of involvement in a sport, whether you're a player or a fan. And organizations really think about investing first and foremost in nurturing their existing customers, and then growing them to make them more avid fans. And then the next final step is to kind of create new fans or to acquire new stakeholders in the process, in the building of the core vision and ideology. So again, what they're looking to do, that escalator is looking to retain who's around, then grow their faith, grow their excitement about what the product is, and then ultimately to get more people on that bandwagon to create and acquire new fans. For sports marketers, the escalator is crucial, in part because the fan surveys really indicate clear intentions to move up the escalator. People want to identify with specific sports teams and then get very involved. So if we can use this escalator to retain, grow, and create new interest, you're going to have a really good, viable product. The smartest organizations will even have multiple tactics and plans to reach user segments and to get them to move up along the escalator. One way you can really get people to move up that growth escalator is to think about designing or even redesigning in certain products that kind of capture a special space in the minds of target consumers. And this is what they consider as product positioning. So getting people very emotionally involved and to place that product in someone's mind that they want to be a part of it. This involves a lot of research, it involves a lot of development, and also a lot of design. NASCAR is given as an example about how they used product positioning by creating new modern mega tracks complete with corporate boxes and upscale dining facilities to really kind of show individuals, like, you know, this is where you want to be. You want to be in this press box. You want to be watching the event from a special area. And so product positioning can be very successful if you do the right research, development, and design. Finally, involved with step 3 is really talking about the product and how it's often referred to as one of the marketing's 4 P's. But process management is really kind of how we look at product, price, place, promotion, and then also public relations. So these P's are all influenced by how well employees interact with consumers, and that's what's called process management. And typically, the best marketing plan, best practices, are listed for you right here on at the bottom of page 47 in regards to our authors. And they really talked about how the best practices are really about being able to bring that radio and television production in-house, whether it's into the stadium, to sell 80% of tickets before an opening match, develop a full menu of season ticket packages, whether it's just 3-game tickets, 5-game tickets, or maybe even just a weekend. Also talking about building your product, not just waiting for a superstar to come along and rescue it and to be the sole reason why people are using this product or coming to your games. Develop your product to make it great so that when a star does jump on board, it only jettisons that product or your company even further into the next price range echelon. And then also remember that on average about 50% of the sports properties locally generated revenue comes from ticket sales, and that all revenues are directly tied to ticket sales by the sports business money tree. So ticketing sales can be quite important. But those are your 5 P's of sports marketing. Let's move on now to the strategic step 4, which talks about the marketing planning process. Step 4 talks about the marketing planning process, and this is what's referred to as the intellectual process of creating ideas and then testing them with key stakeholders, key constituents. Because the right organizations, the successful organizations, will design and then redesign themselves around their strategies, not necessarily the other way around, especially if it comes to very rigid stakeholders. And before you can actually do this, though, and I might want to back up a little bit, the marketer has to ensure that the senior executives will support the plan. So there's nothing worse for a marketer to have this great, big, beautiful, elaborate plan and then can't follow through with it because it lacks complete support. So successful marketers make sure that they have the support to move along. And the key typically to getting your financial backers, your team leaders, the team owners to buy into your plan is to make sure that you've included research. Surprise, even in a class that's not really truly exercise science related, I'm still telling you research is important. And then also making sure that you're including key information from the stakeholders. So remember, an effective marketing plan that carefully blends all the P's into a portfolio of activities that moves the customer up the escalator. There's careful coordination of all efforts is required from everybody involved in the planning, not just the marketers. It comes down to the head coach and even sometimes the athletic trainer being involved. And the reason is because a lack of coordination can eventually, at some point, dump fans off the escalator and cause serious issues for the company or the product. So you want to try and get as many people on board with your marketing plan as possible. Now that you hopefully have support and you have a great marketing plan in place, the next is to actually implement the plan, to start it up, but then the next step is also to control and to evaluate it. And this is something that should be an ongoing event as your product is being marketed, as a football season is progressing. Analysis, evaluation, and control really truly should be everyday events. And they kind of refer to it as grabbing the moment and debriefing your successes as well as your failures. A lot of times we can suffer from assumptions, and that was outlined in chapter 1 when it talks about market myopia. We have these ideas of everything will be all right. We have these assumptions that aren't based on reality, aren't based on research, aren't based on quantitative information. And if we don't truly have that evaluation that takes place consistently, we can really lose sight and we can eventually fall on our faces with our product or with our season passes or whatever teams it is that you're focusing on. So evaluation also needs to be done on an event by event basis. It's consistent reflection, consistent polling, gathering of data, quantifying it, putting it in Excel spreadsheets, and looking at the information to look for trends in order to be able to understand what consumer satisfaction really means to your company or to your product. And your consumer satisfaction is really kind of a formula that comes from the difference between the benefits of the product and the costs of the product involved. So once again, indicators of satisfaction, benefits, and costs all need to be monitored and evaluated, just not in the short term, but also in the long term. And this is why we emphasize the importance of measuring the lifetime asset value, or the LAV, in determining the effectiveness of all sports marketing strategies, but also in evaluating the true return on objectives, and that's referred to as an ROO, but also the return on investment, the ROI. So a marketer has to consider other issues as well, including ethical principles. And again, on page 51, your book does a really good job of Laura Nash's simple framework of 12 questions that discuss ethics without a sermon. So just read over those and be familiar with them. The last part of your chapter talks about 8-point ticket marketing, sales, and service plan model. You should probably be familiar with it. It's from the Aspire Sport Marketing Group. I really like the figure that they've given us on page 52. It's figure 2.3. It's their unique plan structure, and it kind of drives their fan relationship management philosophy. So read up on it, be familiar with it. It's pretty straightforward. That's actually the end of the chapter. As always, I encourage you, make sure you've read, make sure you've highlighted and outlined, taken notes from the chapter. If you're concerned about your progress or the score on your quiz, Some of the activities that are here listed for you in the back of the book can really help give you an idea if you've learned the concepts from the chapter. So I encourage you to do those, even though those aren't officially assigned to you for any sort of grade or homework. But thank you for listening today, and make sure that you listen to the next lecture for Chapter 3 in regards to understanding the sport consumer.